I absolutely love armor knights. I don't know what it is about them. Maybe it's the goofy animations that generals get in GBA. Maybe it's because I'm a sucker for an underdog. Maybe it's the neuron activations from the no damage sound effects. Or maybe, just maybe, it's related to my well-documented love of triangle attacks. You see, the first time I ever pulled off a triangle attack, it wasn't by using Pegasus Knights. No, I used Bors, Barth, and Wendy, some of the worst units in Fire Emblem The Binding Blade, and I trained all of them during a draft playthrough and let them triangle attack Idun to get the true good ending. The one that actually turns out even happier than if you kill Idun with the Binding Blade. And ever since that fateful moment, I have had a deep spiritual connection with Bors' Fire Emblem. I joke about him being the best unit in the franchise, tout the legitimate applications of his rescue drop in Chapter 2, and I even have a rule in my Discord server that says you can't insult Bors. Which, by the way, my Discord is linked below. If you're interested in joining, we would love to have you. But for as much as I sing the praises of Bors, I've never really taken the time to get to know him. Since he doesn't have a major role in the story, most of his character traits are confined to the infamously slow Fire Emblem 6 support chains, and I just haven't ever wasted the time to get there. I mean, I'm dragging 4 move units through the entire game. I'm already taking a long time. I can't extend my playthrough even further to get their supports with each other. But today I plan on rectifying that mistake. So get ready for a deep dive character analysis of Bors, the best unit in all of Fire Emblem. At the beginning of Binding Blade's story, Roy is studying in Foray when he is called back home by Eliwood. Since Lilina was visiting Foray at the time, Bors chooses to travel there with Roy in order to protect her since she is his liege. After defeating some brigands who were attacking the castle, Roy sets off on his journey to investigate the brewing civil war. While initially Roy was only going to be accompanied by his own knights, Alan, Lance, and Marcus, Lilina requests that Bors travel with him as well to ensure his safety. Bors, of course, was able to intuit this before Lilina had to directly ask him, because he is familiar with his liege in the same way that Marcus is familiar with Roy. This is the first and last instance of Bors playing any role in the main story of Binding Blade. He has a couple of boss conversations in Chapter 7 and 8, but they don't actually give us any insight into his character, or really any insight into the boss's characters either. They feel more like flavor text than anything. Basically, all that we can intuit from Bors without engaging in GPA's anachronistic support system is that he is loyal to Lilina, and that this loyalty is what ended up getting him involved in the major conflicts of the Binding Blade. And honestly, I have no interest in engaging with the FE6 support system. So that's the end of the video. Time for the end of video Patreon sign-off. This was obviously a little bit shorter than normal, but thank you to Gameboo, Fyrent, Cordelia Frey, Jamie Collins, Marin Karen, Thick Molder, George Grenville the 7th PM, Danielle Kalaskis, Jagan is an Est, Caius Cole, Tailored Muffin, Dr. Majalis, Herc, SUP, Gabe the Green, Control Alt Aegis, Jeff, Autumn Kelsey, and TB. Your support means the world to me, especially in times like this, where it allows me the flexibility to take care of medical situations. I also want to say thank you to anyone who subscribed to the Patreon after I recorded this video. Your support is equally important, I just wasn't able to name you because of the way that time works. There is a link to my Patreon below for anyone who's interested, but if you are not financially capable of doing so, likes and subscribes on YouTube's also help. Anyway, bye-bye. That's definitely the end of the video. Don't stick around and see if there's a fake out, because this is real. This is the actual end. Bye. Okay, now that everyone with more than 4 movement has left, we can start the actual character deep dive. And since the reason that Bors joins Roy's group in the first place is Lilina, let's start with his relationship with her. I mentioned that I feel his retainer status is analogous to Marcus and Roy's relationship, because he is her personal bodyguard and in some ways her mentor. However, while the relationship between Marcus and his liege is often characterized by Marcus's controlling nature, Bors and Lilina have a much more healthy dynamic. Bors takes Hector's final orders to protect his daughter very seriously, but he knows that this goes beyond simple physical protection. And as a result, their support chain primarily focuses on the emotional support that Bors can provide for her. In the C support, Bors intuits that something is bothering Lilina, but she doesn't want to talk about it and instead runs off, which is to be expected. I mean, she's a child, so she's already going to have some problems with authority figures, but also her dad, just died. And, yeah, she's a little bit mean to Bors. She calls him annoying and says she just doesn't want to listen to him, but this is completely understandable. And luckily, Bors agrees with me, because rather than being upset at her, he continues to support her in the B support, where he comforts and reassures her as Lelina expresses her feelings of insecurity due to the fact that, from her perspective, Roy is changing and leaving her behind. Bors assures her that while Roy is definitely changing to live up to the newfound responsibilities he finds on his shoulders, he's still at his core the very same person that Lelina used to know. After all, maturing does not change the nature of a person. In their A support, Lelina expresses that she understands that Roy isn't purposely avoiding her, but she still feels as though she's being left behind. And unfortunately, there is a degree of truth to this. With all of the responsibilities now on Roy's shoulders, some of his relationships are going to slip by the wayside, and Lelina rightly says that she is still just a child. She doesn't have the same responsibilities, can't relate to him in those same ways, at least not at this moment. This conversation is very close to a Lelina monologue, with Bors saying very little until the end where Lelina asks him to stay by her side, and he says, "I am a knight and my loyalty is with you. As long as you need me, I shall always be there for you." It seems very clear to me from the support chain that Bors takes his final request extremely seriously, and not just to protect Lelina's body, but also her mind. He sees her as a full-fledged person. She's a child who just lost her father, she's feeling isolated from her peers, and she needs someone to be that emotional support. And Bors is just the person to do that. Sure, he is also going to ensure that she doesn't take an axe to the face and get one-rounded, but I think that he sees his primary duty, correctly, as taking care of her in the absence of her father. Contrast this with Marcus, who doesn't seem to understand that Roy could get anything from the relationship other than physical protection, and needs to be convinced not to retire because Roy says that he will miss Marcus. It almost feels like the child liege is the one playing the parent to the old man in this situation. From a gameplay perspective, I would of course always prefer Marcus to be on my team, but I think Bors would make a much better pseudo-parent than Marcus does. And we can see this carried over into some of his other supports as well. The most obvious one to look at is his younger sister Gwendolyn. Here, though Bors's motivation is to care for his younger sister, he comes off as closer to a helicopter parent than anything else. He is constantly pretending to coincidentally run into her so that he can dote on her, asking her if her armor is too heavy, how her eating habits are, whether there are any boys in the army treating her poorly, just all sorts of very, very intrusive and pestering things that she just does not want to deal with. And in their A support, she finally calls him out and says that I know that it's coming from a place of care, but you need to let me be my own knight. I won't become strong if you keep doting on me like this. And Bors realizes that he's kind of been the one acting immature in this relationship, not her. While Bors's behavior in this chain is definitely objectionable, I can see that it comes from a good place, and the fact that he's receptive to feedback and presumably changes his behavior when called out on it reflects very well on him from a character perspective. The next support I want to talk about is Bors and Astolfo, because this once again features Bors being able to emotionally support someone who needs it, but it also highlights his other two major character traits. Those being the high regard in which he holds honor, and the general distaste he has for fighting. The support chain begins by demonstrating Bors's rigidity when it comes to honor. He is upset at the fact that Astolfo is drinking, and this carries on as a major theme throughout the C and B supports. As the Armor Knight once again attempts to convince the thief to lay off the booze since he's setting a bad example for the others, Astolfo has a breakdown. The reason he's drowning himself in his drink is guilt over the fact that he feels he has failed Lord Hector. He thinks that Hector's death is his fault. He says,
I heard there was a traitor in the Lacy Alliance. If I'd gotten off my lazy ass long enough and be doing my job properly, that wouldn't have happened. Lord Hector would never have lost, as long as he had the right information.
Upon hearing this, Bors immediately changes from disciplinarian to comfort daddy, assuring Astolfo that it's not his fault. He points out that the responsibility for Hector's death doesn't fall on just one person. Everyone failed Hector, all of the Knights of Ossia, and he includes Astolfo in that group, which is important because Astolfo was never actually knighted. Despite his normal rigidity when it comes to ceremony, Bors is willing to make an exception because it means something to Astolfo. He recognizes that the thief fought to defend Hector with his life, and that, in his eyes, makes him a loyal knight. Ceremony be damned. It is with this gesture and a push from Bors that Astolfo is able to move forward and, in Bors's words, make the dream that Lord Hector couldn't fulfill come true. When Bors expresses to Astolfo that he is a knight and deserves the title, Astolfo bursts into tears of joy. Finally, he can participate in the triangle attack. But jokes aside, this is once again a demonstration of Bors's ability to care for and protect people in ways other than physical fighting. He acts as a parental figure to the rest of the Knights of Ostia. Barth may technically be their leader, but Bors is the one who fills that role, at least from an emotional standpoint. And on the topic of Barth, let's talk about his support conversation with Bors. Bors and Barth really do not get along. They have very different approaches when it comes to their perspectives on being a Knight of Ostia. As demonstrated in the other support conversations, Bors values protecting the people he cares about in ways other than the battlefield, and he takes his knightly vows very seriously, being something of a stickler for rules. Barth, on the other hand, is all about strength. He became a knight because he thinks it is the best class, so clearly he hasn't read any tier lists after 2006. He fights in the arena both to make money and because he's eager to continue fighting to keep himself trained for when battle breaks out. Bors disapproves of the fighting in the arena because he sees it as being below him as a knight. It is not fighting for good reason, it's just fighting for the sake of fighting or fighting for money. However, due to his inability to protect Lalina, Barth starts to question his own strength, and his identity is shattered. If he's not a strong warrior, then he doesn't know what he is. Despite Barth's attempts to hide his feelings, Bors is able to intuit them, and knows just the right way to offer support. Rather than acting like a parental figure, which would likely come off as patronizing, Bors offers to work together with Barth. Bors will be the shield and Barth can be the spear, two equally important parts of a fighting force. On its own, this is a fairly generic support, but I think in the larger context of Bors's other supports, it has deeper meaning. The Bors-Barth support is the only one where Bors does not take on a paternal role at any stage in the conversation, and I think this is because he knows it would wound Barth's pride. Instead, he finds a way to subtly support Barth. He's helping to prop Barth up, and assisting with the emotional problems that Barth is suppressing, but he's doing it in a way that is non-obtrusive and caring, and shows a very deep understanding of Barth's character. There's a lot that the two of them don't agree on, but Bors is willing to set it aside and be the bigger man, which, that speaks volumes. The last support that I haven't spoken about is Bors Ogier. This one features Ogier talking about how he admires Bors ever since he saw him fight in an arena. But Bors says that he can barely remember the fight. He only participated because he was forced to, and he would rather not fight unless he has a good reason. As a result, he's basically suppressed the memories from this arena fight, and he takes the opportunity to ensure that Ogier needs to have a good reason for fighting. You must never fight for the sake of fighting. This upsets Ogier because, from his perspective, he does not have a good reason for fighting. After all, he is just a mercenary. But Bors, switching into father mode, reassures Ogier, telling him that that is a good reason to fight. He's doing it to make money to feed his family, and that is a just and noble cause. Just because their reasons for fighting are different, doesn't mean they both can't be noble. And that's really all there is to Bors. He supports everyone who joins in Chapter 8, but no one else. And his two boss conversations with Tobias and Legance are nothing to write home about. All it is, hey, you're doing a rebellion while Hector is away. It's nothing special, and doesn't really give us any insight into his character. But I was surprised. I actually really like his character. Like, it's not as in-depth as someone like Mercedes, but it is, once again, someone who cares for everyone around them. Bors is just incredibly caring and wholesome, and serves as a pseudo-father figure to the rest of the Ostian Knights. And if a wholesome Armor Knight daddy sounds familiar to you, then that's probably because you've played the Tellius games. That's right, Braum is a Bors archetype confirmed. Just like with the Heather video, I have once again tricked all of you fools into watching Braum propaganda, but that's just what this channel is now. We are a Braum fan channel going full force. Mask off, all praise to our Lord and Savior Braum. Get on the Braum train. Let's get on the Braum train. 2024 is the year of the Braum. We are Brauming so hard right now. Let's fucking go. Praise Braum.